you have the authority of your own artist voice, right? You're the only one who can write your song.
Bonnie Hayes is a singer-songwriter and educator from San Francisco, California. Her songs have been recorded by Cher, Bonnie Raitt, David Crosby, Bette Midler, and more. Her debut 1982 album, Good Clean Fun, introduced her as a pop rock goddess and propelled Bonnie into a career of writing and performing. She went on to become the chair of the Songwriting Department at Berklee College of Music in 2013. And recently stepped down from that position after nearly 10 years to run the Berklee Master's Program.
Hey,
Was that all correct?
Great. Yeah, just say masters, the online masters, because the people who are doing the on-campus masters will get cross.
Okay, gotcha. Perfect. So yeah, I know you because you were the chair of the Songwriting Department at Berklee that I so eagerly graduated from. I remember the first semester that you can actually declare your major. I think it was in your second semester. And like the first possible day that I could declare my major as songwriting, I was in your office. It was me and another guy named Ben Higginbotham.
Oh yeah, I remember.
I just, there were a lot of students that I went to school with at Berklee that were just kind of testing the waters, figuring things out. And I just remember like the first day I possibly could, I was like, this is what I'm doing. And went
There's
on to
not that
graduate.
many songwriting places where you can really get a degree in songwriting.
Yeah, it's true.
Most of even the things, the people that say they have a degree in songwriting, it's like popular music studies, and then you learn songwriting, but it's hard to get a degree in songwriting.
Right. It's super in-depth and has like, it's multi-level. But yeah, like we were just talking about, you probably helped to shape that program. Do you know when the program actually first started?
No, it started in like, I want to say, I mean, it had been there for 30 years.
Wow.
It started Jack Perricone, who you probably met.
Yeah.
I think he was still teaching there.
Yeah. I think I had a class with him actually.
Yeah, you had Survey of Popular Song Styles.
Yes, yeah.
But he's a brilliant arranger, great piano player, great musician, and Pat started the major, and I want to say like in maybe the 70s or early 80s. I don't
So
have
this was after Berklee was already established.
Yeah. Berklee had been roaring along as a jazz school. So this was one of the first sort of pop kind of oriented things, but it was still pretty jazzy. I mean, Popular Song Styles is like a jazz. He spends a lot of time on Great American Songbooks.
Yeah, it goes way back.
Yeah. I mean, most of the students are like, when was this? Wait, what? Because you're playing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and literally, the people who were in that program had been born in like 1990, right? So, they're like, what? When was this again? It's like ancient history. But so they started it, and it was and a lot of the program is the way that it was then. The lyric classes, the separation of church and state, separation of lyrics and music. I started requiring the production stuff.
You implemented that.
I added the senior seminar. I added a bunch of the options for the advanced classes. But most of it, like they were really of the opinion that recording was going to be a different thing from songwriting. But right now, producers take a share of the copyright. So unfortunately, I think songwriters need to produce so that they can keep the share of the copyright that they would have to give to a producer.
Definitely. So. And I mean, at the like basic foundation level, to be able to record demos and just to be able to like sit down, or even to be able to write music like while producing, that's such a big thing nowadays that not like myself, I don't really do that, but I have so many friends that the way that they sit down to write music is by opening their computer. And like just experimenting, which is, I admire so much, like as a
even for writing lyrics, you share a document. Like, so we had Not the Main Characters came to the Berklee LA program last summer, and they wrote a song. The producer was on stage making the beat and kind of going along with them, and they wrote the song, typing into a document. We had the document projected,
Hmm.
And they were writing the lyric and like replacing lines and writing them and like looking at each other going, yeah, I think that's better. Like it was
So
really
collaborative.
fun to watch the whole thing happen, but it was all done
Yeah.
on like a computer. It wasn't sitting in a room.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. And I mean, obviously, it's a lot, the process is a lot different than it was in the 40s. That's for sure.
Even in the 60s, before computers. I
Hmm.
mean, even in
Yeah.
the 80s, you would have
Yeah.
to go and sit in a room and have a little recording device,
Yeah.
which wasn't on your phone because you didn't have a phone yet. When did cell phones happen? It was like the early 90s, right?
Yeah. I mean, I personally didn't have my first cell phone until I was in high school. Like they obviously existed, and I had like a little like flip phone. So I'm a millennial and I still feel like I'm old, like compared to these new kids. Like when I
I
started
mean, it's
writing
happening
songs,
fast.
it really is. Like I'm turning 30 soon and this is scary, but when I started
Yeah,
writing songs, there was no like recording device.
yeah.
There was no like
You
open
had to
my
get
phone and
a
record.
recorder and buy
Yeah.
one,
Yeah. Yeah,
and
my
then turn it
MP3
on and have little
player.
tapes or.
Yeah. So this leads us into my first question because I know you as an educator and like as a mentor, and I'm familiar with your music when I became a part of the songwriting department at Berklee, I looked into your experience and your career as a songwriter, but I'm curious to know how you started writing songs. Like how old were you?
Such a funny
How did that
story.
happen? Like,
Because I was a jazz piano player, right? So I came up,
wow.
I mean, I had the wildest thing happen to me where I was taking like classical piano. I had taken it for years and years, and I didn't know anything about music theory at all. Like
Mhm.
nobody ever taught me any chords. I only could read, right, what you put in front of me. That's a typical classical musician's experience of being given a piece of music and going, this is what you play. You don't play any notes that aren't on there. There's
That's
no
so
chords.
interesting though, because I feel like you know so much theory
Well,
by
what
being able
happened
to
is
read, but it's also so restrictive.
somebody opened the door for me,
Hmm.
like, and that's why I'm such a nut about education because I went and took piano lessons from a young rock and roller who said, "Don't you know?" I was like, "How are they doing this?" I'm like, "This Neil Young record, like, what is he doing?" And they're like, "Oh, he's just playing chords." And I was like,
What's
"What
a
are
chord?
chords?"
Oh my God, that's hilarious. What's a
And
chord?
yeah, I didn't know. And he goes, okay. And then he showed me how to make chords and he showed me like a blues progression, like this, that kind of thing. And then the
Like a
blues,
12-bar blues.
this,
Oh my gosh.
that kind of stuff. So I was like, I went home and proceeded to lose my mind. I figured out like 20 songs by chords, and I became a complete nut for theory, and
Hmm.
also for me playing jazz, like it had I mean, I love playing jazz and I played standards a lot and I can solo. I know how to, analyze a jazz chord progression. I've listened to a ton of jazz, all different kinds, but this is a box, like it's a historical form.
Hmm.
Um, it's all about soloing, which is
Yeah.
so wanky.
Yeah, yeah. It really is. Yeah, it's just like as many notes as you can play and let's take turns and see
And
who's the
having like
best.
people taking like 10, 11, 12 choruses and you're just sitting there comping the same I don't know, it
You're
just
like, I
felt
just want to
very
write lyrics. I want to feel
I was a
something.
creative writing major and I was like,
Hmm.
how do I make this be something that I like could see doing for the rest of my life? Because at the time I was like, there's no way I can be a jazz musician. And I moved to New York and I was like, I'm gonna be a jazz piano player. And I went and started like playing jazz gigs and you make like you play like for 4 hours in a basement and you make $20.
Oh my
I was
gosh, it
like, this
pays
will
for rent,
not
didn't it?
do. This is not
Yeah.
going to work for me. And so I basically, I went on the road. I got a really good road gig where, the kind of road gig where you get on a salary and you have a roadie that moves your gear and
Wow.
you get your, nice hotel rooms.
I've never
And
heard
we
of that before.
we were opening, I know, nobody, I mean, I've had three big time road gigs and they are the best gig in the world, except you lose your ability to do anything for yourself because you forget
Hmm.
about paying bills and doing your own wash. So, but anyway, I went on this tour and we were opening for Bob Seger. And Bob Seger is a super famous, really successful songwriter, performer, right? At the time in the 70s, it was the late 70s. He was one of the most successful musicians in the world, right? And now nobody's ever, all the kids are like, who's that? Look it up. But anyway, he was
Yeah.
we were playing stadiums, right? And he would take the whole crew and our whole band and crew out to dinner, and it would be like, get anything you want. And we'll get, let's get 10 orders of 12 oysters, and I'd
Oh
be
my
like,
goodness.
wait, how's he doing that? So he said to me, he goes, you should write songs,
So this was before you ever like
I had not
wrote
written a song.
down any
I was
lyrics.
in my early 20s. I didn't start writing a song. I mean, what
Oh
happened was I
wow.
got off that tour and I decided I couldn't deal with New York. It was really cold and hard. And
And then you
I
moved to
had
Boston.
roads, right? So I lived on the fourth floor, upstairs from Max's Kansas City, and I would have to carry my Fender Rhodes up four flights of
Oh my
stairs.
gosh.
And then, I didn't have a car, so you'd have to get a cab to carry your roads to I mean, it was impossible. It was not
Hmm.
doable. So I moved back to California and I started trying to write songs. I spent like a year, like just agonized, attempts to write songs and
And so
rewriting
you
them.
were in your 20s at this
I
time?
was in my 20s. Yeah. I might have been
And it
22.
was with the 80s, 90s?
That was early 80s, maybe late 70s. I think I really started getting the hang of the songwriting after I'd been working on it. And I wrote a bunch of songs and I got a band together. I didn't want to sing, but finally I ended up having to sing and just kind of tuned it up. And I wrote I started really thinking about what I was trying to do. Like instead of just writing the song going, that's good enough. I was like, can this be like better? Can I write a song that doesn't make people want to run away out the
Being
exit
a little more intentional.
or start talking to each other because it's so boring, right? So I basically started realizing that, part of this is about seducing people,
Hmm.
and figuring out how to do that without like selling my soul to the devil. And that was always sort of a balance for me. And that I just wrote some songs and suddenly all of a sudden people were like, these are really good. I made a single myself. We made a single, me and my band. I borrowed the money to pay for it. Took it
Wow.
to the radio stations,
And
the
this was like
college
on a
station.
CD back in the day?
It was no, it was a freaking
A tape?
single. It was no, it
What's
was
a
a single.
single?
It was vinyl.
Oh
And I
my
took it
gosh.
to the radio stations and they all started playing it. And the next gig I had, we had 500 people there.
Oh
And
my
so,
goodness.
yeah, it was like I wrote a hit song and it was the same thing I told my students to do, which is you got to make it happen. You can't get
Can't wait for
signed and then make
anyone.
something. You have to make it happen and then you'll get signed. And that's what happened to me. I started this single started getting played all over the country and I, you know, I didn't even know what was happening, but basically then I got a record deal and I got a publishing deal.
Oh my goodness. What was the song called?
Shelley's Boyfriend. It was about my
Okay,
sister.
yeah.
It was like because I didn't really write love songs. I didn't want to write love songs, but it was like this like big sister song.
Hmm.
It's still like people just
Is your
love.
sister's name actually Shelley?
It's Michelle, but we called her nickname in
That's
our family is
amazing.
Shelley. And she brought, a like lizard boy home, and we were all like, "Oh no."
Does he
I have
know?
a family. My family is like seven kids, right? So
Hmm.
there's no privacy. There's
That's
no
amazing.
hiding. Everybody gets on everybody and friggin', takes everything apart. It's very unprivate. It's
I
really,
love it. That probably contributes to the quality of your songwriting. Like you started your journey as a songwriter by being just like brutally honest and
I
writing
love
about
it.
like a very personal experience with literal sister.
Yeah, it was something that really happened. The stories that I put in the song, which were about like cruising the boulevard, and yelling at people out the window of your car, was stuff that had happened to me when I was in high school in the Central Valley of California. So
That's
I really
amazing.
like used all my real life experiences and feelings of being, kind of treated unkindly by a boyfriend and put them into this
Yep.
cautionary tale for my sister.
I love that. Yeah, I definitely did that. Not necessarily with a cautionary tale for my sister, but a little more personal. I feel like my first songs were definitely about all of the above, high school, being mistreated by boys before you knew how
It's the
you were
main,
meant to be treated.
it's the theme.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's funny
Yeah.
because I have so many young women that I still work with in the master's program, and that's basically, it's really hard to get women off of that as a
Hmm.
theme, right? But you can, and I did, but it took me a while, yeah,
Just
to
got to
stop
do it.
being.
Yeah.
I was just deeply offended.
I love it. And so was that the first song that you ever wrote, or that
Oh
was the
no, no,
first
that was
like
I had
good
been
song?
writing terrible songs for a couple of years at
Do
that
you
point.
remember like the very first song that you ever
Yeah, I
wrote?
wrote a song called Boca Raton, which was about Boca Raton, Florida, because I read this news story about rats eating the palm trees from the inside out, and then the
You are
palm
so
trees would fall over.
obscure.
And I was like, that's a metaphor.
Oh my
And I wrote
goodness.
this song about how culture was eating itself. I mean, I was a very brainy, I'm an intellectual, right? I was like very like metaphor for like cultural just degradation and the way that we treat people, So I
I
was
love
very,
that. Oh my gosh.
yeah, I was an advocate early on for,
Meant to be a writer.
yes, well, very opinionated, you know.
I think that's important, to be honest. In writing, I think like why would we write if we didn't want our voices to be heard, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah.
So I think that's a positive thing.
I think, for me, like I never got into that thing of writing songs. I mean, I did later, but writing the whole thing of writing a song to somebody about how they hurt you, like I really didn't ever get in there and do that. Like that, I didn't think that was an interesting perspective. I mean, now I sort of see it differently, but so I was writing these, like, I wanted to write about civilization and society, right? And then,
Hmm.
but I realized nobody cares. So that was when I started writing, like Shelley's Boyfriend, which was sort of about that, but also about her and me.
Yeah, it's kind of sad how surface level songs kind of have to be able to be relatable. But Justin, like my husband, who also studied songwriting at Berklee, is very much like a societal songwriter. Like, we've been together for over 7 years now, and he's written like maybe two songs about me. And I feel like, every other song that I write is about him, but it's like, it's interesting to see the different perspectives that writers can have. And like, he gravitates toward, like you said, like very like civilization, like, big epic metaphors, like
Right.
the future of society and like humanity, which I love because I guess that's what he's thinking about. And for me, it's like I want to like, get down to like the minute little details of my personal experiences and like lay it out on the table. And um, that's interesting. I think, we need more songwriters that are going to actually write about things that are a little more important than,
I don't
you
know,
know,
man. Like I'm not positive that it works though. Like I remember hearing the Rage Against the Machine song. I forget the name of it, where he's like, the really famous one where Tom Morello is just like, you this and you that, and I was like, I guess, but like it's not that much fun. So
yeah.
for me, I kind of got into this thing of like, well, I don't want to listen to somebody scold me, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody else does either. So I kind of got off this society. I mean, I write a lot of songs about like how weird it is, some of the stuff that we expect ourselves and
Hmm.
other people to do in this society, like the
Work.
weird ways. Yeah, work. I mean, for real though, and
Yeah.
the whole aging thing and like like where you really do look and you go, why did I spend like 40 years of my life doing anything and everything just to make, money, and like the whole, and then try to put that into a personal story, right? So that it's
Yeah.
not,
So it's balanced.
yeah, so
Doesn't
it's
feel
got
like an
emotion
attack.
in it, because it is kind of frustrating to get to be my age and go, what the hell got into me? Like, why did, I mean, I'm one of the few people that I know who actually has had a ton of fun in their life. But you know what I
That's because
mean?
you
Like,
bring the fun wherever you go.
that's right.
Clean fun. You
I'm a
started out
fun.
your career with some good, clean fun.
Exactly. And that was, part of what happened there was I was like, we just want to write, we just want people to come to our shows and have a good time.
No, I love it. I was listening to some of your music today just to kind of refresh myself. And it's like, obviously, it's a very generational thing. Like, this must have been the
80s.
80s. Like, it sounds so 80s. But
Oh,
to
yeah.
me, that is so nostalgic. It's like nostalgic for a decade that I didn't actually live through. But it's like that, like, it's got like a punk rock and
We
roll
were
chick,
punks. We were
like,
total punks. Like we played
energy
all
to
the
it.
punk clubs.
I love
And
it.
yeah. And then when I started doing poppier songs, all the punks were like, oh, she's sold out. And I was like, yep.
You're like, I
Yeah, I
have
like
money
having
now.
500 people at my show instead of 100. I sold out.
That's
So,
hilarious.
but we were definitely in the punk scene in San Francisco, and it was a great scene, very
That
lively.
that was also something that drew me to you. I'm so glad that you were the chair when I went through my like 3.5 years at Berklee, because not only were you like a, confident, powerful female songwriter that I was able to look up to in this sort of deep well that I was getting myself into without sort of realizing what exactly I was getting myself into. But also you're just like a badass. Like it's so, I think that's one of the greatest things about like a music school is, when you go to college or like any sort of education facility, it's like the typical professor is kind of like a, you know, old white guy with a suit on, and he's got his briefcase and he's
You
gonna
can't see
tell you all
yourself.
the things. And
Yeah.
yeah, you can't see yourself. And like going to a music school is kind of different because you have all these like really cool, creative, professional people and artists and songwriters and instrumentalists to look up to. And it was just cool. It was cool to be a part of that and to grow into the department. And we even did I forget what they called it now, but the toward the end of my years at Berklee, it was like a one-on-one like songwriting
Yeah,
mentorship
directed
class,
study.
directed study. And I'm very grateful that I got to do that with you, because I feel like
I
I
loved
felt
this.
very special. I
Yeah.
was like, I guess I should do one with Bonnie.
And
um,
I mean, what's great is you go in a room with somebody and you pay attention to them,
yeah,
you know,
it's
and take them seriously and go, let me hear what you did. And then
yeah,
you talk to them like they're your friend, like
yeah,
they matter, and
yeah,
it's respectful. I think, it's easy to get into a thing in a school where I'm the teacher and you're the student
yeah.
and I'm
And
going to
I know
explain
better.
it all to you and I know everything and you don't know anything. And, you know, those sessions are the point at which we become equals, because we are equals, because you're as good a songwriter as I am,
Hmm.
right? And there is,
I don't know
because there
about that.
isn't, but you are, because you have the authority of your own artist voice, right? You're the only one who can write your song. So that's the point that I'm making, is that as a teacher in an art form, we meet our students as equals. We have to, right? We
Hmm.
share what we know, they share what they know, and they know a lot, right? And so I really felt like, for me, directed study was a place where I got to do that with my students.
Hmm. Yeah, I really appreciated that. And it's more of a, yeah, I don't know, aside from like office hours, which, when I was in college, I tried to go to my professor's office hours and it never worked and they never had time and they were always busy or not there. And
Some of
but it
them,
was some form of like connection, especially with something like songwriting. It's so personal, and you have to be able to put yourself out there in classes and have your song up on the screen being critiqued. It's such an important part of learning is like, realizing the ways in which you can do better from the perspective of other people. But yeah, I just really appreciated that. There was one session that we had where I showed you a song. I can't remember which song it was, but and I can't remember exactly what you said, but I remember like it was something so brutally honest.
Sorry.
No. And you know what? I was just a little like naive, fragile songwriter, and like you just like kicked it out of me. And I remember like leaving that day and like crying.
I'm
But then after
sorry.
no, but it was necessary, because I wouldn't want to be paying all this money and,
And
putting
have
all this
everybody
energy
tell
into
you everything's
something.
fine. Like, why did you go to school for, I
Yeah.
mean, the hardest thing in the world to do is to realize that your shit does stink. And I think for songwriters, that whole thing of putting your song up there and there's a gap between what we think we're doing and what other people think we're doing.
hmm
I can't tell you how many times people said to me, "Oh, your music is kind of country, right?" And I'd be like, "Why do you say that?" And they go, "Oh, it has guitars."
You're like, that's not
Like,
what
what?
makes
Are you
country.
from the planet? So, but that
Yeah.
whole thing of like what there's a dissonance between what
hmm
like all the time with students, they would go, I go, "What's this song about?" And they'd be like, "Well, it's about this thing that happened to me when blah and blah and blah." And I'm like, "Why isn't that in the song? Like you're
hmm
writing the shell of the thing without the thing.
Yeah.
I can't recognize it." And I think really what feedback is for is to go, we're not hearing what you're saying, right? So
Yeah.
you got to say it in a way that I can hear it. Otherwise, what's the freaking point, right?
Yeah.
So there is a point though. There's a point to writing songs even if nobody understands them, if it's making you happy.
Yeah. It's
So
true. It's
it's like the
true.
reasons we write, right? And there are a lot of reasons besides I'm trying to communicate to somebody else how I feel.
Yeah, and it can be so personal that ultimately, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what anyone else's opinion is, or it doesn't matter if the song can be better if it's, you know,
If it's
if it's
what you,
yours and it's the way that you want to
yeah.
portray it. But it like I've had some feedback from songwriting professors that was more on the border on the line of like unhealthy. And I think what you were it wasn't like you need to do this differently in your song. It was like, why are you doing this? Or something like a very broad statement that was more like it allowed me to kind of like go within myself and like realize some things that I was holding myself back on for no apparent reason. Um, but yeah, that's part of the reason why I loved the program so much. And I also did um a small class with Melissa Ferrick.
Oh, she's
I'm
so great.
She's the best.
Yeah.
I can't remember the names of these songs.
She's one of the most inspiring teachers. It's too
Yeah.
bad she doesn't really like teaching.
I kind of
I,
love that about her though.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's one of my
She's
favorite parts because she just comes into class and she's like, I'm just I'm
just
just
another
who I am.
songwriter here to like give you some,
But
I'll
like
tell you what
that's
I think. It's an opinion.
she's just so real. And yeah, I took a higher level semester class with her, and I think it was just like 6 students or something. And we would just like have prompts, write a song every week, bring in our songs, perform them. And like it was just such a supportive
Singer-songwriter
environment.
workshop sounds
Yeah, yeah,
like.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, probably. I don't know why I can't remember the names of these classes
that's
anymore. I'm like, I learned all that and then forgot it. um,
funny.
but yeah, it was just so supportive, and it's such a unique program to go through. And yeah, people like you and Melissa and Aaron, just having these like female, you know,
I mean, half the
badasses,
it
I
was so
guess, to
interesting
look
at
up to.
Berklee because so many of the students were female.
Yeah.
that
And it's very male dominated
it
industry.
was male dominated when I got there. Now, I believe it may even be slightly tipped toward women teachers now.
Oh, the teachers?
I hired right before I left, I hired Kat Reinert, Sherry Lee. I hired this Lee Moretti, who's like a guitar player, arranger. I hired Paula Galatano. I'm not sure if you ever met. Sarah, I hired full time. I hired just a ton
That's
of
amazing.
women, yeah, and
Well,
they
there's a
ended
lot
up.
of female songwriters, I believe.
Well, partly what happened at Berklee was there were a lot of vocalists that were admitted to create parity in this gender parity in the student body.
Hmm.
Because it's, when I got there, I think
It was
that
like
there was
6 to 1 or
it
something.
was 30% women. And I
Yeah,
believe now it's at or near 50-50, which
that's
is a huge,
incredible.
huge change. But
Wow.
they did it mostly by admitting more women. And so, I mean, more singers because most of the singers are women.
Hmm.
So the songwriting just swelled up. It's like a huge major now.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, that's great to hear. And I remember, like, I was in the first iteration of the leadership council,
Oh, the Student
and the
Leadership
program
Council,
was
yeah.
still kind of small, not small, but like I knew most of the people that were in the program in the department.
Yeah.
Um, that's amazing. And I wanted to ask you as well, being like a music educator, what is what have you learned about yourself by educating young songwriters?
I mean, it was interesting. We were just talking about directed study and that whole
Hmm.
thing of like sort of one of the things I learned is, I want to be an expert, right? Like it's a lot of teachers do. Like we want to be the ones who have the secret knowledge, the keys to the kingdom. There's this kind of ego that goes along with that.
Hmm.
And what happened to me was I started asking people, like they would play me a song in my directed study instead of going, well, here's what I'm hearing. I would say, what do you think is wrong with this song? What do you think that you would want to work on in this song? Where did you feel uncomfortable in the song? And this was a huge change in the way that I approached teaching. And I still teach
Hmm.
this way where I go, we'll get into a class and I go, all right, tell me what you know about metaphors, right? Tell me, somebody explain to me what. And so instead of going, I'm going to tell you what a metaphor is. So it's this
Hmm.
whole thing of changing the kind of conversation that you're having again to starting with where the person is at because we're making art.
Hmm.
It's not learning engineering. There isn't I mean there is technique, but it's not a cut and dried one size fits all type of
It's
technique.
very subjective,
It's very
which is
subjective, and
the
also we
funniest
don't
part
want to
about it.
write formula. I mean, it's good to know formula, but I can teach you formula in 2 classes.
Hmm.
Then what, right? What do you put in the muffin recipe, right? It's a
Yeah,
muffin recipe. It's just a freaking recipe. It's this many eggs, this much flour. But what else? What
right.
else?
How
Is
do
it
you
zucchini?
customize it?
Is it bacon?
Yeah.
What's the deal, right?
What are your favorite things? What's your favorite
Yeah.
muffin flavor?
Yeah, and combinations, right? So I
Yeah.
think that whole idea of sort of asking a songwriter, what do you think? What before I say anything, what do you think is going on with this song? And they'll usually say, well, I felt like it did. I didn't feel like it made sense when I just played it. And I go, yeah, where did that happen? And they're like, right here in the pre-chorus. And I go,
Right.
yeah, that's what I think.
Right. So it
You're
kind of
right.
shifts the focus to them, and then they can kind of like internalize and
And
understand
but it teaches
what
you
it
that
is.
you're right. See, when you have that feeling when you're playing a song and you go, this part sucks, you're usually right.
It
So
does suck.
trust that and
Yeah.
fix it, right?
The
And
gut instinct.
that instinct is, we songwriters are also super sensitive. If
Are
they're
they?
not usually not good songwriters, right? So because they're like, yeah, here's my song, and you're like, stop it. So I think for me, that whole thing of like, well, you probably already know what you need to be working on, right? But I can help people when I go, hey, you've written the same song. I think I did this to you. You've written
Yeah, I
the
think you
same
did.
song. I think you're the first one that I made do the spreadsheet where you had to put the tempo and the key and the topic. And I would
Yeah.
make everybody do this comparison because
Yes.
you have more than 3 songs in 6/8, you gotta
Yeah,
not
no,
do that
all of my
anymore.
songs are in B minor. I've had literal like band members be like, it's kind of interesting that all your songs are in B minor. And I'm like, oh, yeah, is it
Well, it's because
interesting?
it's a good place for your voice, but
No,
also if
it's
you put
true,
it
but
in the relative major of that,
yeah,
you're going to get a whole different vibe. But also the
yeah,
tempo range, most people are in like have a
yeah,
default tempo and vary five BPMs either
yeah,
direction, and that means all your songs sound alike, you know.
yeah. I'm still writing the same songs.
Well, that's one of the hard, the thing is you don't have to write different songs. And
Well, I
again, I
think
would
that
just
it's like,
question the whole idea that you have to sort of have a varied, but if you want to go open for a national, you need a set that has an up tempo song.
mhm. Yeah, people keep coming up to me and are like, I just want you to write a song that I can dance to.
It-
And I'm like,
exactly.
okay, well,
I'll try.
maybe listen to some other music.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Like at the end, you're the
Yeah,
boss, you're the authority
it's
on what
true.
you have to say and what you want to say. But you were at a college where we're trying to teach you how to be a
Yeah.
professional
It's
songwriter.
it's
That's
important
different.
to it's important to be able to challenge yourself as well. I think for me, like it's comforting and it makes me feel secure and safe and it makes me feel good to write the songs that are natural for me to write. And I think probably most songwriters feel that way. But it's like every five or so, or however many songs, it's like try something different. Like,
Yeah.
it's important to write the songs that make you feel good, that you feel like you can just be yourself and like let it out. And whatever happens naturally is great. But yeah,
I call
it's
them
important to
practice
challenge.
songs. Practice
Yeah.
songs are good. And you just go, like a lot of times for me, I would just say, who are you listening to? We'll listen to, like a whoever, like a Phoebe Bridgers song. And then I go,
Hmm.
okay, what's your favorite thing about this song? And then
Hmm.
let's steal that and write a new
Yeah.
song. And I
Yeah.
think that is really powerful. And they're like, well, I don't really like this song. And then 2 years later, they're like, I ended up loving that song. And it's one of my favorite songs. And I go, see, you got to just like
Yeah.
relax a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. That's actually my favorite way to write is just to listen to music that I love and not necessarily like steal from it, but just like listen to a song and then write
Channel it.
based on that
I mean,
song.
I
Like
st I over
however,
I go, I love that chord. I'm taking that chord.
yeah.
I'll hear some chord and I take it and put it in my song. And nobody has ever said to me, "Hey, you got that chord from that Phoebe
It's
Bridgers."
one chord.
Right, because it's one voicing or something, or
Yeah.
it's a note against a voicing. It's just these little
Yeah.
moments that
Yeah.
because I can analyze a song, I go, "Oh, she's singing the ninth, she's playing the B minor, that
Hmm.
she's singing a C sharp, and that sounds
Hmm.
so cool." So I'm going to do that. And I
Yeah.
think just that little being able to seize that little moment and sort of turn it into something, it's like really
Oh, it's my
magical.
favorite. It's so
Yeah.
important to like learn to do as a songwriter, and learn that it's okay. Like it's
Yeah.
okay to listen to a song and then write
Get
based on that
inspired. And
song.
I mean, sorry, but there's no new chords. There's no new chord
Yeah, no,
progressions. There's
seriously.
really
Like,
no new idea. I mean, there's only what you have, what your perspective is. And
yeah.
so I feel like that idea that things have to be original is or that they have to be somehow something that has never happened before. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of, I mean, it is something that never happened before in that particular combination, but I don't think you can say your chord progressions should be more interesting because we've heard this chord progression so
hmm
much.
It's a little unrealistic. And
Yeah. I
it's
mean,
it's
it's
funny.
interesting. I had a conversation with a student today and she had written a bad girl song, right? And I said something like, isn't there doesn't everybody have a song that's either called Bad Girl or has Bad Girl in the refrain? Every girl I know has one of those. I said maybe like I mean this is a great version of that song, but I do think some ideas are sort of worn out, right?
hmm
Bad Girl being one of them. I think
hmm
maybe just even Naughty Girl.
Yeah, well, and that's a challenge. That's challenging yourself to also it's like a thesaurus. Like how can you say this in a different way? Or like
Right,
how can you use a metaphor to like encompass the same concept?
right, right.
But yeah, it's funny that we're having this conversation because like when I started this podcast, I was trying to think of what I should name it, and I ended up naming it Songwriting Has No Rules, because my dad, when I was younger, wrote that on a piece of paper and stuck it on the fridge because he's a songwriter. And me and my brother kind of were both starting to write. And it was just hilarious that I went on to literally study songwriting at a high level of education.
Study the rules.
Like study the rules of songwriting. And
Well, there aren't any rules. Your dad was right.
yeah.
Because the thing is, I'm doing this, I teach this writing hit songs class in the master's program, right? And it is fast because what we do is we do data-based songwriting. So it's like what characteristics are always present in hit songs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of things that are always present. Like, there's a certain length of time or like number of repetitions that we can tolerate before we get annoyed, right? And, the songs can't be longer than X amount because we just space out and stop paying attention, or they can't be about like heady topics because people don't really want to think about that stuff or whatever, And so that stuff is present, but usually in every hit song and every hit artist, there's a wild card, right? And there's a wild card. They break a rule that's considered sort of ironclad. They break it in this really intentional, kind of provocative way. And I mean, like thinking about like a song like Somebody That I Used to Know, right? Where, he doesn't get to the chorus until almost 2 minutes into the song. It's a total broken rule, right? But what he does instead is he has hook, and then he has another hook, and then he has another hook, and then he has another hook, and it's like a hook fest, And so I think, we find these ways as sort of, it's like break the rule. The rule that you think is the most ironclad is the one that you should break, because that's where you get your sort of, your difference.
Yeah. And people are going to notice those things, like, whether
I really
it's
noticed
subconscious or not.
I was like, this song just goes on forever before he gets to the chorus, but the chorus was great too.
And you probably like listened to it and like very intentionally and were like, when's the chorus going to happen? This is cool. What's going on? Like,
I was like, this guy just whines for like 2 minutes. I remember he's like, you, now and then I think of when we were together. And you're like, shut up.
But it's so true. Like I've they always say like learn the rules so you can break them. And that was something that my dad specifically growing up was always trying to encourage me to do, like in songwriting and music and in life, like understand what the rules are so that you can break them.
Right.
And just in a way that feels
without breaking everything.
Yeah. Don't break everything, but it's just I just laugh, and that's how I approach songwriting these days. And I have all the tools in my tool belt to be able to like write a hit song and do all the things. And I have these formulas that I was taught and that were like ingrained into my mind through studying writing. And now that I'm on the other side of that, I'm kind of like regressing to before I started studying songwriting in an educational setting, to like what feels good. Because I think that, I don't know, it was just such a natural progression for me to like learn all those things and then go back to my roots of like what really ignites my fire. And then those things that I've learned along the way are just kind of like subconscious, and I just do them without even thinking, or hopefully.
Well, I mean, everybody, the other thing is that for a lot of people, those rules feel like constraints that are unnecessary. And again, you're the boss of your own songs, right? It's the one place in your life where you're in control of something, right? And to me, that freedom, that ability. I mean, there was an amazing moment when I was writing songs, when I was first starting to write, and I told you I wrote a bunch of shitty songs, and I started to like my songs, right? There came a point where I started to like them, and
I remember that feeling.
And other people still didn't like them. Like maybe it's because I couldn't really sing or whatever was going on, but I was still getting like sort of bad feedback from my friends and stuff. are just like sort of like, I don't know, I don't really know I don't know why you're doing this or stuff like that, right?
Excuse me?
And I basically for a while I felt really self-conscious, like everybody's like judging me and thinking, I suck. And then I went, dude, you like it. It doesn't matter.
Hmm.
You are absolutely, nobody's even paying attention. Okay? It doesn't matter if anyone likes it but you.
Hmm. And it's honestly,
Unless you want to make money. And
yeah.
then it matters because that's when you have to start thinking about their experience. But up until then, you're free. And
Hmm.
to me, that is a kind of freedom that money can't buy. Being
Yeah.
free to do what you want in this world and to make your own stuff and to make it go the way you want it to go. And that's how artists are born and that's how they sustain themselves.
Yeah, it's true. And I do think that doing that also can make you money if you are like cool and different and unique and doing something that is different than everyone else, like that's going to make you stand out. Like if you just continue to do that and be authentically yourself, I think that that's the type of person, that's the type of artist, and that's the type of music that I'm drawn to, is something that's not the exact same of everything, that's on the radio these days. Um, but yeah, it's really nobody else's business,
Right.
like what you do with your own art.
Unless you make it their business by asking them what they think. And so
Yeah.
that's the other thing I always say to students is that, when they come in my workshop, and I teach workshops here, and they come in my workshop and they start to play me some song they already recorded, and I go, "Are you sure you want me to tell you what I think of this song? You already invested $5,000 or whatever." I'm like, let's not do this because you're not going to
Hmm.
be happy, and neither am I.
Yeah, that's good advice. So I'll close out the interview. I ask all my guests two questions. And the first one is, what advice would you give to your past self in regards to songwriting? And what is advice that you would give your future self in regards to songwriting?
I mean, songwriting wise, for my past self, I think I would have gotten out of my way sooner.
Hmm.
I think my need to be successful and to be approved of, which I definitely have as sort of a structural element of my personality, kind of got in my way for a long time. And it still does. I mean, I want to tell myself this now, which is it just doesn't matter if you write a bad song and if you write 20, it just doesn't matter. I mean, what matters is that you write and you're engaged in that. But I mean, I have had a really happy time writing songs. It was my happy place. It was not an angsty thing for me. And then for what was the other one? What would I
What
tell other
advice would
people?
you give to your future self, like moving forward in songwriting or in like just being a creative person or
I mean, I'm in a personal place of looking for the balance that I've never been able to create in my own life. And, a lot of this happened because I watched my daughter have the same difficulty with work-life balance. And I, so I'm taking 3 months off this year and I'm going to Europe and wandering around.
that's
Um,
amazing news.
yeah, because I kind of feel like I've just been doing what I've been working. I mean, I love what I do. So it's not like somebody who's like an insurance salesman or something, right? It's not like work per se, but I've just had a lot of trouble stopping
Hmm.
working too much, right? And I'm not the songwriter. I don't even have time to write songs. I teach so much, and I do a lot of nonprofit work and stuff too. So I teach teenagers and stuff. So I'm kind of really trying to get a little more life into my life and a little less work.
A
That's
little
that's
more
what
life into my life and a little less work. I
yeah,
love that. I
yeah.
love that. And I think, yeah, like we were talking before the interview is, I think the pandemic really kind of slapped us all across the face in that regard, no matter where you are in your life.
Well, I
which
mean,
is like
I know
balance,
so many
work-life
kids.
balance.
You know, my daughter is figuring this out at 29 instead of waiting until she's 55, right? And so, and in me, like, I love that she's so light years ahead of me. It's almost like she inherited what I already knew, but she also inherited my workaholism. But I look at the whole like what was the quiet quitting thing and
Yeah. Oh
which
yeah.
and the Gen Zers and everybody's all the boomers are slagging them off and I'm like they're great. They've got a handle on this deal, which is
Yeah.
just like get a life. I mean
Hmm.
literally go get one, make one, build one, do this, do the things, all the things
Hmm.
now, not
Yeah,
tomorrow.
absolutely.
That's
They have their
my advice
priorities
for
straight.
everyone. Yeah, we have a problem in America that, no matter how hard you work, you won't have enough money. So why
We
work
have
at
that problem in
all?
Canada too.
Is that right? Is it go? I don't
Yeah.
know. I idealize Canada as this like
Oh, no,
crazy.
I honestly think it's even worse than the States right now, but
Is that right?
yeah, that's just my opinion though. But yeah, I think and like if you weren't living your life and having experiences just in relation to being creative and being a writer, like what would you write about? Like just, working all day, going to work, coming home, sitting at home, like
It's so
how are you
depressing.
gonna gain any inspiration from doing that?
Yeah. Well, if you're right, if your work is right. But this happened to me when I was a pro writer in LA and I would go to these sessions and it would be like, it has to be a hit kind of sessions because nobody, wants a song that isn't a hit in that world. And I remember just being like, I hate this.
It's a lot of pressure.
It wasn't even because of the pressure. It was just bad.
Hmm.
It was bad music.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
Well, I
I
love
don't
that for you. I'm so glad. I'm really glad. And being back in California
Oh, it's so great.
around nature,
Yeah,
you
I'm
know.
pretty blissed out today. I had a great long swim and went to Pilates and
Hmm.
yeah,
That's
so
amazing. There's
it's
something
pretty.
about the West Coast. My husband is realizing that for sure as well. It's like
Oh
everything's a
yeah,
little
where's he
slower.
from?
He's from Massachusetts. He's from the North Shore. He's from
Oh, right on.
Newburyport.
Right on. Oh,
So
Newburyport. I love
he's,
that town.
I
That's where
know. I love
Melissa's from. I mean, Melissa lived there. She had a
I
house up
know.
there. Yeah.
I know.
Did you ever go to her house?
No, I didn't. I wish I had have, but yeah, it was funny when we made that connection. Yeah,
You should have her on the podcast.
I know. She's on my list.
You should definitely have her
Um, yeah, but it's such a hustle, such a grind, and there's definitely something to that, but living your life is also important. That's great.
It's more important,
It is,
frankly.
it's more important. Yeah, just existing.
Or just fun being with people you love and doing, being in nature, that stuff. It always sounds so cheesy when you say it, but then when especially when you get old like me, you're like, the only thing that matters is other people and, preserving this earth, for
Yeah.
who's coming next.
Amen. Well, thanks for
In
coming on.
yeah, you're welcome.
I
Thanks for
really
having me. It was
appreciate
really
it.
fun conversation.